Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
Well, I'm National Director of the United Coalition of Reason, and I have been a humanist probably since the time I was a teenager.
Well, I originally from North Carolina, came up here about a year ago to work for the Free Thought Equality Fund, which is the political action committee tied to the Center for Humanist Activism. And so my work deals with funding candidates who are non-theists, atheists, and agnostic, or candidates who agree to advocate for a separation of church and state and protecting the civil liberties of all Americans. So that's what my work does, and I'm a humanist and an atheist, and have been that way for a number of years.
From the plaintiffs that brought the case with the American Humanist Association.
According to the lawsuit, you had an unwelcome contact with the Memorial Cross on several occasions. Can you explain?
Yes, what that means, and that's really legal talk, what it refers to is the fact that I come here to Bladensburg from time to time to enjoy the War of 1812 celebrations. And when I come out here, I pass by the cross on my way to the waterfront park, or I pass by the cross on my way to other activities that are going on in the area. And it just reminds me that this cross is on public land. And I don't mind a cross per se, but knowing that it's on public land, knowing that it gives the impression that Bladensburg is a town that endorses one religion to the exclusion of others, that's the impression that's unwelcome.
Lived in Prince George County, and has frequently lived in Beltsville, Maryland, and would occasionally come down to this area, either going to DC or just coming to this area for the memorial and the parks and stuff. And when I first moved up here, I had no idea about the history of the War Memorial or the Peace Cross, and when I passed it, it just looked like this large Christian cross. And I was thinking, okay, well, who owns the land? And then it was brought to my attention that it was publicly owned. So then that's the issue. And so, when the issue came about and they approached me about it, I was definitely on board and something that I wanted to be a part of. So it's definitely have ran across it several occasions.
Fred Edwards had such an unwelcome experience, but I asked him where he wanted to do the interview. He suggested the Bladensburg Memorial Peace Cross. Bishop McNeil also did his interview at the Peace Cross. Steve Lowe went to the demonstration on May 31st, 2014, held at the Peace Cross. None of them appeared to be traumatized while we were doing the interviews or at the location. Let's take a moment here and just look at Arlington Cemetery, where many of the World War I soldiers were buried. Then, let's look at some of the cemeteries in Europe where the World War I soldiers fought, were killed, and were buried for our freedom. Do you see a difference? Yes, I'm sure you do. There are lots of people paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, not to mention the families who were left behind to live a life without their loved one. I would suggest that the three plaintiffs and members of the AHA, American Humanist Association, might want to visit those cemeteries. I'm sure they would get a great welcome and a huge education. The American Humanist Association is a plaintiff too. Can you tell me about them and your relationship with this association?
The American Humanist Association has been around since 1941, and it's the nation's largest humanist organization. I was executive director of the American Humanist Association from 1984 to 1999, so I have a long history with the organization.
The American Humanist Association is the largest organization nationally representing humanists, atheists, and free thought and secular issues. And a part of the big organization, they have adjuncts, and a part of that is the Center for Humanist Activism, which my organization is associated with. So while my work has AHA, American Humanist Association, has nothing to do with, none of their money goes to my work, my political work, but it is up underneath the umbrella of the American Humanist Association.
Be human. Yeah, there is a symbol for. If you go to the American Humanist Association website,
Okay, yeah, I've kinda seen it. It looks like
a little, it's a man, it's
Yeah.
a person.
According to the lawsuit, they are a non-profit organization with 170 chapters, 24,800 members. They started in 1941. In 2014, the U.S. population was 317 million. Thus, the AHA represented about 0.0001% of the U.S. population when they filed the lawsuit. That's not even close to a percent. The AHA considers themselves to be happy people who do not believe in God. They are atheists. They act like a godless religion and are free thinkers. They claim to be freedom from religion. To me, it's still a religion, just a godless religion. Unlike other 503c religious organizations, they have attorneys on staff to attack people throughout the country claiming they are infringing on their First Amendment rights. Other religious organizations cannot do this, and they will lose their tax-exempt status if they do. The IRS should reevaluate the AHA's tax-exempt status. I like Steve Lowe's explanation of the humanist symbol. It's a happy person. I just wonder about that. Let's look at the symbol. When you look at it, it is a nondescript person with legs spread open and the arms up in the air. That's interesting, isn't it? Looks like a person surrendering their rights to me. Just saying. Could it be that the humanist would like the American people's political and religious views, thoughts, actions, and freedom stifled? Basically surrender to just their views. Now that would really make them happy people. But would that be against the First Amendment rights of everyone? Of course it would. Now, that's something to think about. Do you have a family members who have served in the military or at war?
Dad served in World War II. He fixed airplanes in Britain during the entire conflict, and that was the role he played. My uncle Raymond was a tank commander in World War II, and he served in the Battle of the Bulge. Well, Raymond died recently, and so he was never familiar with the lawsuit. And I don't know if my father is. He's 99 years old, so I haven't tried to trouble him too much with my goings-on.
Yes, my grandfather was in World War II. Uncle was in Korean War. Many uncles who served in military. So yeah, a lot of people in my family have military ties. If they knew and presented with, the arguments of both sides, I feel really strongly that they would, they might have some hesitation about, their viewpoints or agreeing with mine, but I think that they can definitely appreciate the argument that we're making.
Yes, my father was a World War II and Korean War veteran. I have his flag at my house.
Have you ever served in the military? And can you tell me why or why not?
It was during the Vietnam War that I came of age, that I graduated from high school in 1967, and I was highly critical of the war, and I was against it. But nonetheless, I was called up for my draft physical, and I went. But I was a really skinny kid back then, and they also found that I had a hernia. So as a result of that, my being very much underweight and also having that hernia, they wouldn't take me. They gave me what was called then a 1Y classification, which meant they would call me up if it were a national emergency.
Never was presented. I was always education was my path to success, and my career was always involved in politics, and so the military was never an option for me.
So what I did instead is I joined the Peace Corps, and I served 2 years in the Peace Corps. College when the draft came up, and I wanted to finish my college.
Okay.
Well, those are very interesting reasons, aren't they? Yeah, the 3 plaintiffs did not serve in the military for one reason or another. They did have family members that were who have had military experience. I wonder what they think about the filing of the lawsuit to remove a World War I memorial. Now, I do not have military experience myself, but I tried to serve my country in other ways. I'm a member of the auxiliary for the American Legion. J.T. Torres, a film director and editor, along with Robbie Ferguson, the website designer, all served our country in the Air Force. One of the narrators was a Marine. And my father was in the Navy in World War II and a Marine Staff Sergeant during the Korean War. So we all had family members who served our country. What do you want the outcome to be from the lawsuit?
Look at it. It looks for all the world like it's on public land. It looks for all the world like, okay, this is either the state of Maryland or the city of Bladensburg endorsing one religion. So even if you took a postage-sized stamp piece of property right under the cross and said, okay, we're going to sell that to someone else, and therefore technically it will belong to someone else, the passerby driving by would not get that impression. And when it's illuminated at night, it's just a bright cross-shaped light in the night. It gives the impression of Christianity and nothing else, and it gives the impression of government endorsement of Christianity. That is not an adequate solution, and it is, in fact, it would require some kind of gerrymandering by the local politicians in order to make sure it was only sold to a Christian organization and not to anyone else. What if an atheist organization bid for that plot of land that they wanted to sell?
The gold star, the memorial to the dead soldiers, the families who lost their families, the names on the memorial. The existence of a memorial on public land is not a problem. It is just the use of the Christian cross as part of that memorial that we find contrary to the First Amendment and the separation of church and state and the respect for other religions that we have in America. And we would be very happy if the cross were to be replaced by a flag.
If the memorial would be removed, then coming into Maryland from D.C. would show the memorial with just the stand and the plaque. Then it would show the store sign, Pawn King. Yes, it would look like Prince George's County and Maryland honors a pawn shop. I don't know of a church who would want the Peace Cross like Fred Edwards suggested, because it is not a religious cross. Out of all the people that I've met doing this documentary, the only ones calling it a religious cross are the plaintiffs and the American Humanist Association. They want to make it a religious argument to fit their political agenda. Peace Cross has the American emblem embedded in the cross and the words courage, devotion, endurance, and valor on the bottom of the cross. A Christian cross is either plain, or it has Jesus Christ crucified on it, or it has a shroud on it. On churches, there is a cross or a steeple, but it's always kind of plain. There is not an American Legion emblem or the words on a Christian cross, nor on the steeple. The only place that would want this cross would be the American Legion and the people of Prince George's County. But the people of Prince George's County and the American Legion were the ones that had it made and put there in 1925 to honor the 49 men who died in World War I for our freedom on land at the time that was owned by the town of Bladensburg. The memorial is in what is called Memorial Park in Bladensburg, Maryland. Now, we all know war is awful and sometimes necessary, and people die. There are losses and sacrifices made by the living and the dead. Let's not forget that. Let's not remove this memorial because it would dishonor the 49 men and their families. Let's not forget history. Let's keep it as a symbol of peace, and maybe someday there will be world peace. World War I was an awful war. It was known as the war to end all wars, and people were devastated by the loss of their loved ones. The memorial is so large and on a busy intersection because they did not want people to forget the sacrifice that these 49 men made. If it was a small memorial, it could be overlooked. So they made it maybe 49 times the size of a small memorial for that reason. Granted, now the country is more diversified now, so memorials have changed for one reason or another. But why destroy or remove something that represented the men who served and gave their lives heroically for our country, especially since a cross represents extreme sacrifice, and it is not religious based. A cross has been used for World War I as a symbol of sacrifice. Next, will the AHA be removing everything that has maybe a triangle? After all, Christians view a triangle as a holy trinity. Then you might have to remove like the Washington Monument because it has triangles on the top of it. Now here's a thought. What about the Christians believe that God created the world and the world is round? Will they have issues with circles as symbols? They might start attacking symbols not just of a cross now, but triangles, circles, stars. Where's it going to end? Here's another cross. Yes, look closely. It is a plain cross, but a telephone pole. If the plaintiffs win this lawsuit, will all the telephone poles need to be modified? Why are they not suing states about this? Most telephone poles are on land that's owned by a city, county, or state. Can it be that the American Humanist Association is targeting just military or what they perceive as religious? I just hope that they are not traumatized by telephone poles while driving. Maybe they should have their driver's license revoked. What if the land the memorial is on was purchased individually or put on a historic trust? What are your thoughts?
When you take any kind of discrimination and say, well, it's just historical, so let's leave it up, by that logic, then you should leave up any monuments to racism and other kinds of things in this country.
There was a National Trust inventory form submitted to the Maryland National Trust in 1985 and in 2006 for the Peace Cross. However, it was never completed and no one nominated the Peace Cross into the National Register. If this was done, the Peace Cross would be on the list in the National Trust and could not be destroyed and be removed. Plus, there would not be a lawsuit filed to remove it right now. Who is your favorite president and why?
My favorite president? Well, I would say it was Thomas Jefferson, the man who laid out the expression wall of separation between church and state in his letter to the Danbury Baptists.
Thomas Jefferson.
And why?
I went to the University of Virginia.
Okay, well that's a good one.
And he wrote, and most of what he said I agree with. And he was the inspiration for the First Amendment and the separation of church and state. And he wrote the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. And he had, so his opinion of religion was that it needed to be private, personal, yet optional to everybody.
I'm not surprised that Steve Lowe and Fred Edwards' favorite president is Thomas Jefferson for the reason that they mention. The second panel of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial has one of his quotes that states, "Almighty God hath created the mind free. All attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or brethrens are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion. No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief. But all men shall be free to profess, and by argument to maintain, their opinion in matters of religion. I know but one code of morality for men, whether acting singly or collectively." Now, my understanding of this is that Thomas Jefferson believed in an almighty God, and that God created our minds to be free, and God wants us to always be free. Thomas Jefferson also thought that people can worship a religion of their choice or not, but they are not compelled to any religion. The American Humanist Association does not believe in God, but they are trying to force their influence on others in this country using the First Amendment rights as a weapon to threaten lawsuits against people, places, organizations, and memorials. They are stifling the rights of others. They do not want other people to have a free mind and practice a religion of their choice in public. They are actually infringing on others' First Amendment rights.
Not just because he's our first black president, but because I worked on his campaign in 2008, and that's what started my political career. So my favorite president would be Barack Obama.
Now, Bishop McNeil's favorite president is Barack Obama. History will tell us in 10, 25, 50, or even 100 years how President Obama affected the country. My favorite president is Abraham Lincoln. I think he showed great leadership during a critical time in our history. He tried to unite us instead of divide us. He had great faith and resolve and demonstrated it to the country. I have a plaque on my desk in my office with one of his quotes. It says, "God is the silent partner in all great enterprises." Can you give me your definition of civility?
Civility would be acting in a manner that shows deference to other people and their views, a willingness to listen to what other people have to say, fair play in one's social dealings with others. Those are the kinds of things I would identify with civility.
That's why we're not fighting fisticuffs with anybody about this.
Correct.
We're bringing, we made I think the AHA made an official request some years ago about having it removed or objecting to it because of what it stood for, the Christian.
It's my definition would be empathy for others, being compassionate about your fellow man, embracing humanity and all that it has to offer, all of the diversity, all of the different cultures, and just doing things, with the idea that you never know who's looking.
According to the Institute for Civility in Government, the word civility is claiming and caring for one's identity, needs, and beliefs without regarding someone else's in the process. I do not think that they are practicing civility in regards to them wanting to remove the peace cross. February the 25th, 2014, the American Humanist Association, along with 3 plaintiffs, Steve Lowe, a resident in D.C., Fred Edwards, a resident in Greenbelt, and Bishop McNeil, a resident in Beltsville since July of 2013. They have filed a lawsuit against the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission because they feel that the Bladensburg Memorial World War I cross, right across the street, otherwise known as the Peace Cross, violates their rights. Can you tell us about the lawsuit and why it involves the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission?
Which is why we were named in the suit. And the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission has owned that property since 1960.
What would you say to the citizens of PG County who feel that there is no merit to this lawsuit?
Well, at this point, and from its original inception in 1919, the Peace Cross was built as a memorial to the veterans that died in service of this country in World War I. So the Peace Cross has always been a war memorial. There are no religious markings whatsoever on the Peace Cross. It is not of any religious intent. It was built here as a first monument in what is now our Memorial Park, and it's been standing in completion since 1925. In addition to the veteran markings, it also has the names of all of the war veterans who it was set to memorialize as well.
The plaintiffs have stated that their goal is to have the Peace Cross removed. They are also requesting that their attorney fees and nominal damages be paid. What is the goal of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for this lawsuit?
Well, again, because the lawsuit is ongoing, I can't speak specifically to the case, but of course, as the defendants, we have responded to the lawsuit.
And what website will they be able to look at for information on the trial date or anything on the case?
I believe that the Maryland court system does have the documents up on their website for any interested parties to view. I believe that both the complaint and the ongoing status of it are both available.
With all the memorials right here, who's in charge of the maintenance of the land? I know that you all own the land. Who's in charge of the maintenance of the land and the maintenance of the memorial?
Some of the monuments belong, their maintenance, care, and restoration belong to a different part of the organization that would go beyond landscaping, because, for example, the Peace Cross is actually designated as a historic site in the registry for Maryland. So its care is significantly different than just another facility would be.
Structure is in need of desperate cleaning, and there is structural damage to the Peace Cross, as you can probably see. Is there any plans for any work to be done or any maintenance to be done on the Peace Cross that you know of?
Right now, we are actually in process of contracting someone to do a review of the Peace Cross, if you will, to see what actual work or repairs or restoration do need to be done to it. And again, because it is a historic monument and it has there was a special way that the concrete was done to make the Peace Cross. It was the first of its kind, actually, and the process was actually named after the constructor. But we'll have to see what special care that the Peace Cross needs, and the study for that is going to be underway in the next few months.
Do you think that maybe since the Peace Cross is over 50 years old and meets the requirements to be part of the National Registry of Historic Places, that it should be considered for it?
That might be a good idea. As you know, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning owns many historic properties in Prince George's County. So the Peace Cross is one of them.
And if a concerned citizen went ahead and nominated the Bladensburg Memorial or Peace Cross into the National Registry, how do you think that the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission would feel about that?
Again, we know that the community loves the Peace Cross. It's been part of this community for nearly 100 years, and so again, we own many national, statewide, and local historic figures. So the department is more than happy to own pieces of Maryland history.
If the Peace Cross was on the National Register of Historic Places, then it could not be removed or destroyed by the American Humanist Association or the 3 plaintiffs or anyone else. Plus, there would be funding to clean it and maintain it.
That is true, Renee, which is something very significant to consider.
The community used the First Amendment to defend the Peace Cross. For example, they used the freedom of religion by having a diverse group of Christians and non-Christians and even atheists as a part of their group on Facebook and at the demonstration. They used the freedom of speech by putting a Facebook page dedicated to people who support saving the Peace Cross. Kathy Davis and Peggy Webb Brose formed the Facebook page that has over 3,500 members who share their thoughts and opinions. Peggy did research on the 49 men who are listed on the Peace Cross and posted this information on Facebook and has been helpful for this documentary. They used the freedom to petition. Carol Stevenson put together an online petition that has over 7,000 signatures. They used the freedom of press because there has been numerous newspaper and magazine articles and media coverage of the Peace Cross, including this documentary. They used the freedom to assemble. Kathy Davis organized several demonstrations as a way to show support for the Memorial Peace Cross. They had a very professional flyer to announce the May 31st, 2014 Save the Peace Cross demonstration. They continued to announce it on Facebook. There were over 100 people who attended the event. Let's look at some of the interviews from the Save the Peace Cross demonstration.
She has done all the work and the archives and the history. She has brought these men's faces to life. She even pulled up the last letter to mom of one of the soldiers that died.
That was really sad.
It was really sad. And these people, no, it's a war memorial. It's a war memorial. These men died. I don't understand how someone can actually sleep at night or even have relatives that are veterans knowing that you are desecrating what they fought for. Not that they actually fought for that cross, but that cross was in honor and respect for our veterans who died. They were somebody's son, somebody's father, somebody's grandfather, somebody's brother, somebody's cousin. That's the bottom line. And you can't treat people like that. If you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. And I know me, I'm not falling for it. When I lay my head down at night, I don't care if you're alive and I don't care if you're deceased. Somebody needs to stand up for you. They need to stand up for the living veterans just as well as we stand up for the ones that are deceased.
Well, I know there was a complaint about it being a cross, and I'm a Jew, and it certainly does not offend me, and it's standing for all the people who have perished trying to protect this country, and which was based on freedom. And my father came here from right out of the Holocaust, and he one day told me he was very concerned about America, and when I asked him why, he said, because Americans often are like sheep. And I almost didn't come today, but I thought I don't want to be one of the sheep. It's time to stand up.
Right.
And he had said that's how Hitler did what he did. because everybody acted like sheep and just followed along and waited for somebody else to stand up. So that's why I'm here today. I just can't see something that has been here all these years that I've passed since I was 5 years old.
Right.
To be a bother to somebody.
Important memorial, for the men who came back from World War One, and I just think it's a terrible shame that somebody would be offended by something such as this. So we decided we were going to come down and lend whatever support we could.
We do a number of living history and educational outreach programs in the schools and whatnot to try to keep the memory of World War One and the soldiers that have given their sacrifice for our country alive, and to pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah, I have no idea what the guys, I'm assuming it's one person or a small organization. I don't know what their real issue is. To say that they're offended by it, to me, just doesn't make any sense. They're only able to have these protests, because of what these guys did in the war.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we'd be, this would be a whole different place.
My family grew up here. I mean, my father grew up in Hyattsville. I've my whole entire life I've driven past this Peace Cross. So I mean, it has a lot of personal value to me. But I can't imagine why you'd be offended.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things to be offended or in our country, and this is not one of the ones that I really think they need to be offended.
The reason that we're out here is because of this Peace Cross.
And how do you feel about the Peace Cross?
I want it to stay right where it's at.
Okay. And why is it important to you?
Because to me, it's a symbol, of men and women that died to protect this country, for our freedom. And that's the reason why we can stand right here, right now. We can talk openly. We can say anything we want to each other because we have freedom of speech.
Exactly.
We have our Constitution and everything else. And any time that somebody threatens that, that's when we get on our bikes and we ride.
That's
to
wonderful.
support that. And the cross itself, it's just that. It's just a cross. It's not there as a religious monument. It's there for to honor men and women who fell to protect this country. And that's something that we as the biker community, it's very, very important to us, And we'll ride to any monument.
Sean Riley, Assistant Director, National Legislative Commission for the American Legion, and Christopher Nywim, Director of Veterans Policy, and Jeffrey Steele, Assistant Director, Grassroots Coordinator for the National Legislative Commission for the American Legion, were able to give a brief interview in regards to the Peace Cross.
Monument first came to our attention a couple of months ago when we became aware that an organization had filed a lawsuit against the state of Maryland to have the cross removed because they thought that it was a offensive and an undue support of religion by the government. The American Legion, given that as an organization, when we were a young organization, funded and built this memorial in honor of and in remembrance of those who gave their lives in World War I from Prince George's County, Maryland. And so the cross has a modified version of the American Legion's emblem located on it, and given that history, the American Legion takes an interest in preserving the cross and keeping it where it stands. And so in that case, in that sense, we brought a lawsuit or rather we've petitioned the court to be allowed to become a party in the suit in order to defend the cross. One of the things that we've been doing as well is we've been going around to members of Congress, talking with them about the issue, making them aware of it, looking for potential legislative solutions. We don't have any solid legislative solutions as of yet, but we are working with several offices to make that happen. And additionally, I've recently wrote and had published in the National Review an article drawing attention to laying out the details of the case and drawing.
Their goal is to get this moved. Like that's what motivates them, and what motivates us is we serve, we know what it means, and we know people have lost their lives, and something like this is special, and it means something to them. So we're going to fight for it.
One of the key points is that the cross has been used by the military as a secular symbol of selflessness, sacrifice, and service throughout our nation's history, from the Distinguished Service Cross, Navy Cross, Army Cross, and Air Force Cross to the countless crosses placed on headstones for fallen Americans, including the unknown soldiers. Tearing down any part of the Peace Cross dishonors the selflessness, sacrifice, and service of the men it was erected to honor. If the Peace Cross must come down, then so too the many veteran memorials across the country bearing religious imagery. From tearing down the Argonne Cross in Arlington Cemetery to sandblasting the words God from the tomb of the unknown soldier. Sean Riley wrote an article entitled Memorial Madness, dated May 26, 2014, in the National Review. The article states, the American Legion is committed to defending this important memorial, dedicated to the memory of those who lost their lives in the Great War. It has therefore filed a motion through the Liberty Institute requesting that it be allowed to become a party in the suit. Roger Byron. Roger Byron said, the Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial has stood for almost 100 years in honor of the fallen. We are committed to ensuring it stands for 100 more. I'm Renee Green, and I have been committed to defending the Peace Cross too. I produced this documentary entitled Save the Peace Cross as a way to bring awareness about the Peace Cross so people would have a better understanding of its history in order to support its continued existence. I completed the application for the Peace Cross to be nominated and placed into the National Register of Historic Places. The American Humanist Association sent me a subpoena in February 2015. On March the 23rd, 2015, I went to Jones Day Law Firm for a deposition. I was represented by Daniel DeVegas from Jones Day and Roger Byron from the Liberty Institute. As part of the deposition, I was required to provide all materials that were used for the documentary. This includes all research, emails, scripts, videos, and financial records. U.S. District Court Judge Deborah Chasano ruled on November 30th, 2015, against the American Humanist Association's bid to have the monument torn down or modified. Judge Chasano stated that the Peace Cross is not a governmental endorsement of religion. It has honored fallen soldiers for almost a century. Judge Chasano noted that the monument bears a plaque listing the names of the 49 men from Prince George's County who died in World War I. She noted that the Peace Cross was listed on the National Register of Historic Places by the National Park Service after the case was filed. On December 30th, 2015, Monica Miller, the lead attorney for the American Humanist Association, filed to appeal Judge Chasano's ruling. The lawsuit filed by the American Humanist Association and 3 plaintiffs to remove the Bladensburg World War I Memorial Peace Cross is currently at the appeals court. A decision should be determined in 2016.